A jarring scene now 18 months into the pandemic. Hours-long lines for testing in Miami. Scenes reminiscent of the early days as the Delta variant rages in Florida. Hospitalizations in Florida now surpassing 2020 levels. This as over the weekend, the U.S. recorded 100,000 new infections in a single day for the first time in nearly 6 months. The latest surge making the push to vaccinate even more critical as the U.S. finally reaches a key vaccination milestone. Infrastructure week in Washington already in jeopardy tonight after a senator tests positive for COVID. How does this affect the bipartisan push for a deal? And also tonight, Congress is trying to act after that eviction moratorium expired. Is there a plan to keep Americans from getting kicked out of their homes? The major allegations of NHL match fixing being leveled by the wife of a hockey superstar. His response tonight. Amanda Knox is blasting Matt Damon's latest movie, Stillwater, what she says it got wrong about her story. The dramatic return of Simone Biles, the superstar, now just hours away from taking the mat for one final event. It could get worse every Olympics, how climate change is affecting the athletes in Tokyo and forcing organizers to get creative. And our conversation with actor Matthew Rhys, who literally has a job right now that is frankly hard to beat. We'll explain.
And I would like to qualify, it's an incredibly difficult job drinking wine from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. These are the darkest days of our pandemic. That's the message tonight from the top doctor at Louisiana's largest hospital, as her hospital has now run out of ICU beds. Louisiana has the highest case rate in the country right now, but other places are certainly reeling as well. This map shows the virus spreading across the country. Nearly 80% of U.S. counties are now reporting high or substantial transmission. In Florida, hospitalizations are at levels that we saw back in 2020. Residents there lined up for hours to try to get tested. The CDC director is once again stressing this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. But I do want to pass along a bit of positive news tonight. In the hardest hit states, that messaging appears to be working. Vaccination rates are up 200 to 300%. And today, the U.S. finally surpassing 70% of adults with at least one shot 1 month after President Biden's goal of July 4th. But these glimmers of hope come as places like Louisiana are reeling once again and pleading with residents to get vaccinated and mask up. Our Janae Norman leads us off tonight from Baton Rouge.
Tonight, faced with the highest COVID infection rate in the country, hospitals in Louisiana starting to run out of beds. Some reporting seeing a new COVID patient every hour.
There are no more beds left. These are the darkest days of this pandemic. We are no longer giving adequate care to patients.
Federal disaster teams arriving in Baton Rouge to help handle the crush of COVID patients as hospitals face staffing shortages.
We're beyond a tipping point. If adults and children 12 years of age and older would simply get what we know to be a safe and effective vaccine, we could avoid all of this.
Across the country, health officials say it's the unvaccinated being overwhelmed by the Delta variant. In Missouri, 31-year-old Daryl Barker regrets not getting the vaccine as he's fighting for his life in the ICU. His wife and 6-year-old son only able to watch through this window.
I was strongly against getting the vaccine just because we're a strong conservative family. But that little boy out there is a reason to have a vaccine.
Nearly 80% of U.S. counties are now either reporting high or substantial community transmission. Hospitals in those hot zones now pushed to the limit. Austin, Texas, with just 10 ICU beds for a metro area of 2.3 million people. Officials there sounding the alarm about the threat to pregnant women.
Unlike the original COVID that we were seeing 18 months ago, this new Delta variant is affecting our pregnant moms more severely. We've all seen over the past several weeks an increase of our maternal moms that are pregnant, ending up hospitalized and ending up in our ICUs.
Now we ask, Lord, your special blessing upon this unit.
Teams on the front lines praying to get through this latest surge.
Our nurses who are dedicated to their community, their home, are heartbroken watching their friends, family, and neighbors die. literally die.
Over the weekend, more than 100,000 COVID cases reported in just 24 hours, the highest daily number since February.
This remains a pandemic of the unvaccinated, where the vast majority of spread is in this country is among those who are unvaccinated.
Dr. Anthony Fauci saying CDC data shows just 0.01% of breakthrough infections after full vaccination led to hospitalization or death. Today, the U.S. hitting the president's July 4th goal of getting 70% of adults partially vaccinated nearly a month late. But 90 million Americans eligible for the vaccine have yet to get a single shot. And across the country, a maze of shifting mask rules. Louisiana today announcing a new statewide mask mandate.
Simply put, there's a dangerous amount of COVID spreading in Louisiana right now.
The governor there making it plain just how dangerous the spread is. And Janae Norman joins us now from Baton Rouge. Janae, such a sobering message from the top doctor at the state's largest hospital there.
It really was, Lindsay, and they said, look, they knew that it wasn't over just a few weeks ago when cases were, they weren't having many new cases a day, but there was a large unvaccinated population here, so they anticipated that there would be another surge, but officials tell me that they did not expect the Delta variant to overwhelm unvaccinated communities the way that it is already showing it has. They say that the community spread is at a dangerous point. They are past the tipping point, as you heard, and with the impact on children as kids are supposed to be heading back to school. All of that is why the governor here decided to re-implement that mask mandate.
Yeah, children of particular concern. And Janae, it's also important to point out, though, the reduction in risk for fully vaccinated people compared to those who are unvaccinated. Dr. Fauci discussed this today. What did he have to say?
Well, Lindsay, as he said, when you compare the risk, if you are fully vaccinated, you're 8 times less likely to even get the virus and 25 times less likely to end up hospitalized or dying if you do get COVID. That is why officials continue to push the need for those who have not gotten vaccinated to do so. Lindsay.
Janae Norman, our thanks to you. Next, 5 Miami Beach police officers are facing battery charges in connection with the rough arrest of 2 men. Newly released surveillance and body camera video shows the officers repeatedly striking one of the men, even though he was handcuffed. ABC's Victor Oquendo reports on the video and a warning that some may find it disturbing.
This surveillance video shows officers inside the Royal Palm Hotel on Miami Beach surrounding 24-year-old Delonta Crudup, who the district attorney says allegedly hit an officer while fleeing in a scooter after being stopped for illegally parking it. As more Miami Beach police officers arrive, Crudup is on the ground, handcuffed, when, according to the state attorney, Officer Kevin Perez kicked Crudup several times and slammed his head to the ground. Sergeant Jose Perez kicks Crudup in the head as well.
It was just unfathomable. It was unspeakable. It is just inexcusable. And I'm not alone in that feeling.
Another video shows officers tackling and punching a bystander who was recording video of the rough arrest. That man was arrested.
5 officers have been charged with battery. They turned themselves in here to Miami Beach Police Headquarters and have been relieved of duty, and officials say more charges are possible. Lindsay?
Victor, thank you. We are joined now by Miami Beach, Florida Mayor Dan Gelber. And Dan, thank you so much for joining us. I want to get right into the COVID Delta variant surge in your state in a moment. But first, if I can, just to get your reaction to the action seen by these Miami Beach police officers and what you believe should happen next.
Well, I think, what our department did immediately was the right thing. Within hours of the actual incident, the officers were relieved of duty and the whole matter was referred over to the state attorney's office. That happened within hours last week of the incident. So what happened today wasn't really much of a surprise with the officers being charged. Obviously, I agree with our police chief, and I've seen the video as everybody has. It's very unacceptable. But I would say this is not who our department is. And I think the best evidence of that is how quickly they responded to these actions. I've seen our department do wonderful things in de-escalation at great peril to our officers. But obviously, this instance is unacceptable in every way. And what our department did was exactly the right thing they should do, which was relieve the officers of duty immediately, and then within hours refer the entire matter to the state attorney's office for a review of prosecution, which it is being done now, obviously.
And let's turn now to the pandemic. Your state is now the epicenter of the Delta variant surge. You faulted Governor Ron DeSantis' handling of it, specifically on prohibiting local leaders from issuing mask mandates. At this point, is there anything that you as mayor or other local officials can do to get around that?
Well, he's done it. It feels like he's really just tried to convert a healthcare crisis into a political opportunity, honestly. I wasn't crossways with him at the beginning of this whole thing because I thought he was trying to address the healthcare crisis. But at some point, he became all about the politics. And now he's not allowing businesses. He's outlawed businesses from requiring vaccinations to come inside. So including, obviously, the cruise industry, which is many of whom are located here. He's stopped even local school officials from deciding that they want kids to have to be wearing masks, even in the midst of this horrible epidemic. And by the way, he's not allowed us to require any mask mandates, which we had used successfully to reduce our spread during the high points of this disease. So, yeah, we're going to do all we can. We're encouraging people. We're going to require our employees. I believe we're going to encourage the business community to require masks indoors. But he's really tried to make this as hard as possible. And I think, unfortunately, just to sort of curry favor with a small group of supporters who, frankly, are the ones most likely not to wear masks and most likely not to get vaccinated.
Well, what other actions has the governor taken that you believe are hurting your state's ability to get the pandemic under control? What would you call on him specifically to change, to roll back today?
Oh. Well, number one, he should allow us to implement mask mandates. They don't impair expansion of the economy. They just make it safer to expand the economy. So I'd like to be able to do that in places where I think it needs to be done. I think businesses wouldn't mind us doing that. He's closed down a lot of the databases that we have relied on to make these decisions. We don't have a state a database anymore that's available to the public. The idea of outlawing passports, vaccine passports for the cruise industry and other places. He did it, and then he got the legislature to do it. That's a bad idea because the problem we're seeing now is that people who are not vaccinated are the ones that are both getting injured and hurt and hospitalized and dying, and in fact, spreading the disease as well. So you got to reverse that also. So, there's a whole lot of things he's done to attack us from stopping us from dealing with the disease. I think he just has taken the entirely wrong approach to this. And I think he's been following an ideology and a political agenda rather than, what the CDC says. He's literally telling people not to listen to the CDC. I mean, who would say that in the middle of a deadly virus?
And I'm sure that you're communicating with local hospitals and health officials as more of these cases and hospitalizations pile up. Just give us a picture of what you're personally seeing in your community and how this compares to prior surges.
It's horrible. We've got probably about 1,500 people in the hospital right now. Over 300 are in intensive care units in just Dade County. I think the Dade and Broward have the two worst hospital systems in the world right now when it comes to COVID. Our state is leading in virtually every metric. More people are dying, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds every week. More people are getting positive cases by, a huge amount than any other state. So this is obviously something that is terrible. And in my own city, and I'm a small city, we probably have 50 or 60 people in the hospital right now. So, look, I think this has been terribly mishandled. And unfortunately, it's an unforced error because we had the solution. If everybody just took the vaccine, we wouldn't be where we are right now. And honestly, we're urging our residents to do it. We just opened up a site we had closed about a month ago where we thought this thing was behind us, which will allow for both testing and vaccines next to City Hall. But it would be great, by the way, if the governor used his bully pulpit to encourage people to do stuff. And I don't mean to be so critical of him. I've been complimentary of him during this last year and a half. But obviously, in the last 6 months to a year, he's sort of changed direction. And now it's evident that the change of his direction is having an impact on the health of our residents.
And what's your message to both residents as well as visitors? Obviously, your city is highly dependent on tourism. Do you believe that your community should be scaling back as far as public activities are concerned, at least as much as cases are spiking right now, even if mandates or closures aren't in place?
Well, there are two things. Number one, we need everybody to get vaccinated. It's just absurd that people are not vaccinated at this point when the vaccines are available to everyone. And we need everybody telling everybody this is not a political decision. It shouldn't be. But secondly, as a hospitality destination, I urge, and I have, and they've been really good about it, our business community, our hospitality industry, to create a safer environment for our patrons. And they've been really great about this because I think they understand their patrons. They understand that people would more likely come to a place where they feel safer than go to a place where they think there's more virus. It's hardly a great slogan of our tourism industry to say, come to Florida where there's, where nobody has to wear a mask and the virus is aplenty. I think the exact opposite is what we should be saying, is we're pretty careful here. So if you're going to come, wear a mask inside, at least during this moment, and you need to be vaccinated because that's the safest way to interact with people these days.
Miami Beach Mayor Dan Gelber, we thank you so much for your time tonight. Really appreciate you coming on the show. Now to Washington, where the Senate has officially opened debate on the $1.1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill, but it's already facing challenges from Republicans as well as progressive Democrats. And now the pandemic could potentially hamper the debate after a positive COVID diagnosis hit the Senate. Here's ABC's congressional correspondent Rachel Scott.
Tonight, with just days until August recess, Democrats are racing to pass the bipartisan infrastructure package.
Let's start voting on amendments. The longer it takes to finish the bill, the longer we'll be here.
But the Senate's top Republican says, what's the rush?
Senators on both sides expect and deserve opportunities to have a say and to put their own state's imprints on this major bill.
At least 10 Republican senators must sign on for the bill to head to the House, where it faces another set of obstacles. Progressives are demanding their party pass a larger package first.
We will uphold.
Many of those progressives now furious at the White House and
all of these investments in.
Many of those progressives now furious at the White House and Congress for letting the federal moratorium on evictions expire over the weekend, stranding millions of Americans like Tariana Clark of Harvey, Louisiana.
But for right now, this is all that I have. This is all that my family has right now.
Tariana fears she and her two small children will soon be out on the street.
I'm literally going to be in my car until I figure something out.
House Democrats are calling on the White House to act. The White House pointing the finger right back at Congress. Meanwhile, 6 states and D.C. have decided to extend the eviction moratorium on their own.
Rachel Scott joins us now from the Capitol. Rachel, you mentioned the 7 states that are now extending the eviction moratorium on their own. Is there anything likely that Congress will be able to get an agreement on, or will it be up to the state and local governments at this point?
Well, Lindsay, lawmakers in the House have already left town for a 6-week recess. There are no plans right now to take up this issue in the Senate. So what we are seeing from the White House and Democratic leadership is really try and put some pressure on the states to start distributing the money that Congress set aside to help renters and landlords. $47 billion. So far, only $3 billion has been distributed. And they're also encouraging more states to impose their own moratoriums on evictions, Lindsay.
And Rachel, as the Senate debates this infrastructure bill, news tonight that one prominent senator now has COVID and that could potentially have an impact on the debate?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Lindsay. Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina has now tested positive for COVID-19 even after being fully vaccinated. He says that he does have mild symptoms, but tonight we are learning that Graham was also in close contact with 6 other U.S. senators. They were all at a gathering on the houseboat of Senator Joe Manchin this weekend. So far, Graham is the only one to have tested positive, but we are still waiting to hear from some other senators on what those results may be and the impact that may have on this infrastructure deal getting through, Lindsay.
All right, Rachel Scott, our thanks to you. Now we go overseas to Afghanistan, and the U.S. launching airstrikes daily for the past 2 weeks to block the Taliban advances on 3 key cities. All of this happening as U.S. troops head home, and a second flight arrives here in the U.S. carrying Afghan interpreters and others. ABC senior foreign correspondent Ian Pannell reports.
Tonight, Afghan fighters
Racing to turn back the Taliban onslaught as militants advance on 3 major cities. Since America's deal to pull out, the Taliban's moved rapidly, by one estimate, now controlling more than half the country's 400 districts. Civilian casualties are at record highs, and hundreds of thousands are being forced from their homes. Now, for the first time in this offensive, 3 provincial capitals are being assaulted. As we saw when we visited Afghanistan in May, many government troops were preparing to fight. But since then, they've often been unwilling or unable to stop the Taliban advance without crucial American support. Today, Afghan President Ghani blaming the situation on President Biden's abrupt decision to withdraw. The escalation in violence comes as more flights arrive in the US with Afghans who'd worked for America.
Ian Pannell joins us now from London. And Ian, despite the withdrawal of U.S. troops, we're learning the Pentagon has been working to support Afghan forces on the battlefield.
Yeah, that's right. What we're hearing is that actually the US has conducted airstrikes every single day for the last 2 weeks in support of the beleaguered Afghan forces. I think what we've really seen is a big shift on the battlefield. We know that the Taliban had taken over significant amounts of territory, but most of it was rural. It was out into the countryside. Now they've launched concerted attacks against 3 key cities, and it's those airstrikes which are helping try to keep the Taliban at bay. But the Afghans have had to deploy special forces, commandos to those cities to try and stop the Taliban advance. But even tonight, again, we were hearing reports from Lashkar, down in Helmand, down in the south, places where I've been with US Marines and British troops, that the Taliban are advancing, that there's fighting in the city. So although those airstrikes are welcome, I think Afghan officials have real questions about how long they'll last once the US withdrawal is completed at the end of this month. And no doubt, it's a Taliban who have the momentum. Lindsay?
Ian Pannell, our thanks to you. And now to the Tokyo Olympics, and star gymnast Simone Biles set to make a comeback to compete in the final individual medal event after withdrawing from prior contests to focus on her mental health. But while Biles will once again try to vie for gold, a tough loss for the U.S. women's soccer team. ABC's James Longman has the latest from Tokyo.
Tonight, star athlete Simone Biles is back in the Olympics. USA Gymnastics confirming she'll compete in the balance beam final tomorrow in now what is certain to be one of the most anticipated events of these games. She withdrew from the team final a week ago and then one by one each individual event. Vault, bars and floor. She took on instead the role of team cheerleader, making room for some of the other members of Team USA to shine. Jade Carey today won gold in the floor routine, Carey giving her dad, who's also her coach, a huge hug.
It means everything to me to have my dad here. We've been working so hard for this together.
Over the weekend, 24-year-old Michaela Skinner, on the verge of retirement, taking home a surprise silver in the individual vault.
This has seriously been such an honor to be able to step in for Simone and be able to win this medal and just to do it for myself.
And all-round gold medalist Sunny Lee winning bronze in the uneven bars. But a hard strike for US women's soccer, defeated by Canada in the semi-finals. They'll go on to compete for a chance at bronze. And what will be one of the defining moments of these games, for the first time since 1912, the gold medal shared in athletics. Mutaz Bashim of Qatar and Gianmarco Tamberi of Italy tying each other in the men's high jump.
Can we have 2 gold?
Bashim asking if they could share first place instead of continuing with the jump-off, and the officials saying that it was possible. And the longtime friends then overcome with emotion.
Our thanks to James for that. When we come back, hundreds of flights canceled. What Spirit and American Airlines are saying is behind today's widespread disruptions. The estranged wife accusing her professional hockey-playing husband for throwing games to pay off gambling debt, and now he's responding to those claims. But up next, you probably could have guessed this. Climate change is already impacting the current Olympic Games and could have serious ramifications for future ones, too. Stay with us.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live.
Admit it, these days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
Robin Roberts, George Stephanopoulos, Michael Strahan. Wake up with America's #1 most watched morning show. ABC's
Good Morning America.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
ABC News honored winner for the second straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news source. Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live. This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're going to move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people
squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
The investigation into just what caused this deadly tanker fuel crash in South Florida continues. A 53-year-old was killed after his fuel tanker fell off of a highway on-ramp. The Florida Highway Patrol says the driver of the large tanker lost control of the vehicle, but it's just unclear at this point why. Back to Tokyo now, where the athletes competing outside are dealing with a different challenge than the swimmers and gymnasts, some of them the most extreme heat of any Olympic Games. The temperatures have forced organizers to move some events. So are hotter Olympics a reality that athletes are just going to have to get used to? Our Kenneth Moulton reports in from Tokyo.
It wouldn't be the Olympic Summer Games without the heat. But Tokyo 2020, an already unprecedented, delayed, pandemic-plagued Olympics, could be the hottest on record. Temperatures in Tokyo soaring to the mid to high 90s with about 80% humidity.
It's noon in Tokyo. Of course, I'm already feeling it. With the high humidity, it feels like 100 degrees. I don't know how the athletes do it. I just walked up the steps, and that was a lot. Whew.
From tennis to beach volleyball to track and field, and some thousands of athletes competing outside. That crushing heat, dangerous. A Russian archer fainted. A Spanish tennis player taken off the court in a wheelchair, suffering from heat stroke. Daniil Medvedev angrily telling an umpire he could finish his match, but wanted to know who would take responsibility if he died. The Russian tennis player later tweeting, still alive. Tennis great Novak Djokovic calling for a delay in the start time of matches. The International Tennis Federation agreeing to move competitions from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. in the interest of player health and welfare. That brutal heat stoking fears about the track and field events just getting underway.
The body is very good at preventing heat stroke. It will tell you to stop. But if you're in an Olympic competition, there's a temptation not to stop. If anyone does suffer heat stroke, we can deal with it really quickly and efficiently. However, the main aim is on prevention and mitigation.
What do you foresee as the
Olympics officials were recently asked about heat and climate change.
We cannot reduce the risk to zero, but we can minimize the risk. The response to the climate change is a regular course of work during the Olympic Games.
It was just 3 years ago in 2018 that Japan faced a brutal heat wave, killing more than 1,000 people and tens of thousands of others sickened. The scorching heat has climate scientists sounding the alarm that these extreme temps are not just the result of a hot summer, but signs of climate change.
We know that across the globe it is warming. Some places are warming faster than others. I would say Japan and Tokyo in particular are a microcosm for global warming. In fact, if anything, they probably give us a little more of a vision into what's coming in the future because they are probably ahead of the average warming curve.
The temperature of the host city climbing 2.86 degrees Celsius since the 1900s, more than 3 times as fast as the world's average. According to Climate Central, which is a nonprofit that analyzes and reports on climate science, daily summer highs in Tokyo exceeding 95 degrees Fahrenheit have become all too increasingly common.
With a warming environment also means you're going to have more humidity, which means it doesn't cool as much at night, and it doesn't give the body a chance to kind of relax or recover from the heat.
The concern so grave for the Olympic Games, a study titled Rings of Fire was published by the British Association of Sustainable Sport, warning that athletes are being asked more and more to compete in environments that are becoming too hostile for the human body. And it's not just the Tokyo Olympics extreme heat raising concerns. Last year's Australian Open, players survived scorching 110-degree temps. And in 2019, 24 athletes dropped out of the women's marathon in Doha from heat exhaustion. Some saying it's time the International Olympic Committee start taking climate change into account when selecting where and when the games will be played.
In future games, we need to be very mindful of where the games are held. Look at where the climate has been. Look at where the extremes have been. And then look at how they've been changing in the very recent past, so that we don't run into exceptionally hot conditions in some of the places that may be more apt to have them. Second, try not to have outdoor games or outdoor events that are during the peak heat of the day, when the sun is highest in the sky.
These satellite images show the heat island effect over Tokyo, a major urban city that is filled with concrete and very little green space.
There are places where you have a lot of heat-trapping materials, things like asphalt and concrete. And so those materials help the city to heat up more than the surrounding areas during the day, and they also keep the city hotter at night. It's much harder for athletes to cool off in an urban environment, and particularly to get that cooling period they need to refresh themselves at night.
So what does this mean for future Olympic Games?
I would say we need to adapt and or mitigate to the warming climate. Whatever rules we've had in the past aren't necessarily going to work going forward. So we need to innovate, we need to think about new solutions, we need to take further precautions for the athletes so that they can perform at their best, okay? And we don't put them in a situation where exterior conditions are going to hamper their best efforts.
Iceland is sounding pretty good right about now. Kenneth Moten joins us from Tokyo, where it is Tuesday morning. Hopefully you've gotten a chance to cool off, because I imagine early part of the day it's not quite so hot just yet. But officials, of course, they've been planning for the heat for years. The heat in Tokyo expected to be so extreme. Tell us how they're handling the marathon.
Much cooler temperatures here in Tokyo right now because of the cloud cover and some rain that we're getting. And I love it, Lindsay, because it has been so hot here. And you mentioned that that move for the marathon runners up to Sapporo, Japan, which is 700 miles away. And Sapporo right now is about 5 degrees cooler than the temperature here in Tokyo as I speak. The International Olympic Committee trying to avoid images of athletes struggling in that blistering heat. So they made that switch back in 2019. Also, what we know is that the men and women's marathon will happen this weekend, back-to-back days on Saturday and Sunday, and have an earlier start time in the morning.
Yeah, because 26.2 miles in that extreme heat and humidity is tough. Kenneth, also some athletes have even apparently altered how they've trained for the Olympics because of the heat. What are they doing?
Yeah, athletes from countries like Canada with much cooler temperatures for most of the year, they trained in heat labs or heat chambers with temperatures of more than 100 degrees, 40% humidity. Also, we know that the U.S. women's soccer team trained at one of these facilities to try to get their bodies acclimated to the heat. We know that this heat can be very intense for athletes, so getting your body acclimated is very, very important in training for it. But get this, Lindsay, you remember those uniforms worn by Team USA, those Ralph Lauren uniforms worn by Team USA in the opening ceremony? Well, some of them came with cooling technology.
Oh, very neat. Ralph Lauren pulling out all the stops there. I'm sure that they appreciated that. Kenneth Moten, we appreciate you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Still ahead here on Prime, why Amanda Knotts is upset at a new movie starring Matt Damon. Our conversation with actor Matthew Rhys, who literally has a job right now that it is frankly hard to beat. We'll explain coming up. And with the federal eviction moratorium now expired, we take a look at what could come next by the numbers. But first, our tweet of the day. The biggest reggaeton star on the planet, Bad Bunny, teaming up with arguably the biggest Latin boy band of all time, Aventura, for a new song that some of our team are, they're pretty irrationally excited about it. Stay tuned.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you?
How cute.
Yeah.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
This week, it's time to wake up with
Good Morning America,
Ryan Reynolds and John Cena. Plus, GMA's great Summer Rise and Shine tour rolls on. So where will we be next? Just wait until you see. Good Morning America, all this week.
Right now, with so much at stake, Sunday mornings, this is the place. Taking on the tough questions with straightforward reporting. Thank you for making ABC's This Week with George the #1 Sunday morning news show versus the competition.
Welcome to This Week.
I can tell you that I'm not a person who wants to die. I'm not the strongest every day, but I'm not the weakest either. And I won't break.
Whitney Houston, she had the ingredients.
just pow.
She was the queen. A crown was given to her, and crowns are heavy.
You think it's easy being a superstar? You have no idea.
Superstar Whitney Houston. Wednesday night, August 11th on ABC and streaming on Hulu.
He calls himself the BTK Strangler.
BTK was a monster.
My father's a good guy, Boy Scout leader, president of the church, and then there's a knock on my door. He says, your dad has been arrested as BTK. I was like, I think I'm gonna pass out.
Your father is confessing to being a serial killer.
Now, the daughter of a notorious serial killer. Her story. My Father, BTK. The 2020 event special, Friday at 9/8 Central on ABC.
Welcome back, everyone. Earlier, we reported on the concern across the country over the expired eviction moratorium and what it could mean for homeowners as well as renters. Let's take a look by the numbers. While it's difficult to pinpoint, estimates range from 300,000 to more than 1 million families could face eviction in the first month after the moratorium lapses, according to the New York Times. The percentage of homeowners who were behind on their mortgage has dropped from a peak of 7.8% in mid-December down to 4.7% last month, according to Census Bureau household survey data. But more than 1.5 million homeowners are still 90 days or more past due on their mortgages, but not yet in foreclosure, nearly 4 times pre-pandemic levels, according to the real estate data firm Black Knight. And for renters, some 11 million adults are considered seriously delinquent on rent payments, according to Census Bureau survey data. Some $47 billion in emergency rental assistance was made available through the last stimulus packages, but only $3 billion has been distributed to 600,000 tenants so far due to red tape and local and state governments not reacting quickly enough. The White House and CDC extended the eviction moratorium by 31 days after it was set to expire at the end of June, partly to give more time to get that money out. But a 5-4 Supreme Court ruling in June that upheld the eviction moratorium said any further extension would require an act of Congress, which did not happen in time for this weekend's expiration. And we still have lots to get to here on Prime tonight. The billionaire breakup is now official. Bill and Melinda Gates are no more. And superstar rapper DaBaby is now apologizing after his offensive remarks. But first, a look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
World News Now.
And America This Morning.
The best new video.
The breaking news overnight.
Emergency crews called to the town of Surfside.
U.S. airstrikes hitting targets in Iraq and Syria.
The stories people are talking about.
You don't want to shave your legs? Don't. I was going to say.
Oh my. Got it.
And what to expect in the day ahead.
ABC World News Now and America This Morning.
Starting at 2 a.m. Eastern.
Up all night to keep you up to date.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news. Right now, with so much at stake, Sunday mornings, this is the place. Taking on all the tough questions. Straightforward reporting. No spin, no hype, no bull. Thank you for making ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos the #1 Sunday morning news show versus the competition.
Welcome to This Week.
Now, with so much on the line, more Americans are turning to David Muir and ABC's World News Tonight than any other newscast across all of television. This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're going to move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people
Squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues, The Hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
The Delta variant is surging across the country. More than 100,000 new cases in a single day.
In Louisiana, hospitalizations are up nearly 500% in the last month. At the Children's Hospital in New Orleans, they went from 0 COVID patients at the beginning of the week to 20 by Thursday. Louisiana now reporting the highest infection rate in the country.
New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio making a strong recommendation for all New Yorkers to wear a mask while indoors. But maintaining the focus should remain on vaccination.
Just past the halfway point in the Summer Olympics, and the drama includes now political intrigue.
Kristina Tsimanouskaya sparked a backlash in state-run media in her home country after she criticized the way her coaches were managing the team here in Tokyo. She was ordered home, but instead of boarding a flight for Istanbul, she asked for help from Tokyo police at the airport. She was given protection at a nearby hotel and has now asked for asylum from Poland. The Polish government has granted her a humanitarian visa and has promised to help her continue her athletic career.
The history-making transgender weightlifter from New Zealand, Laurel Hubbard, is out at the Olympics after failing to complete her first 3 lifts. China won its 7th gold medal in the event, and
Simone Biles set to go for gold in Tokyo. USA Gymnastics announcing that Biles will compete on the balance beam Tuesday after sitting out all event finals so far.
Bill and Melinda Gates are now officially divorced. A divorce judge signed off on it earlier today. Melinda Gates filed back in May after 27 years of marriage. There was no prenup. Bill Gates' net worth estimated at more than $130 billion. Legal experts estimate the divorce settlement could leave his ex-wife with more than $65 billion.
Amanda Knox firing back at the makers of the new movie Stillwater, which is drawing comparisons to her own ordeal. The new film stars Matt Damon as an American father who travels to France to help his daughter, who's been in prison for a murder she says she didn't commit. Now, Knox says the movie is the latest work to rip off my story without my consent at the expense of my reputation. In a recent interview with Vanity Fair, the director says, "We decided, hey, let's leave the Amanda Knox case behind, but let me take this piece of the story, an American woman studying abroad involved in some kind of sensational crime, and she ends up in jail, and fictionalize everything around it." Knox says the film reinforces an image of me as a guilty and untrustworthy person, adding, if you're going to leave the Amanda Knox case behind and fictionalize everything around it, maybe don't use my name to promote it.
Chaos around the country as several airlines have canceled several hundred flights today. The most cancellations coming from American Airlines, which dropped more than 400 flights, and Spirit Airlines, which dropped more than 250. Both companies say weather is partially to blame. American says it's repositioning planes and crews to improve their operation.
Rapper DaBaby removed from the Lollapalooza Music Festival lineup after homophobic remarks. Show organizers saying in a statement Sunday the festival was founded on diversity, inclusivity, respect, and love. With that in mind, DaBaby will no longer be performing at Grant Park. DaBaby, known for his hit song Rockstar, made the homophobic comments last week at a music festival in Miami and called out people with HIV and AIDS, incorrectly saying the disease would, quote, make you die in 2 to 3 weeks.
DaBaby now also dropped from the Governor's Ball Festival in New York City, releasing an apology today on Instagram, saying, quote, I want to apologize to the LGBTQ plus community for the hurtful and triggering comments I made. Again, I apologized for my misinformed comments about HIV/AIDS, and I know education on this is important.
Welcome back, everyone, to the ice now. And that investigation into an NHL player, San Jose Sharks' Evander Kane's estranged wife, accusing him of betting on and throwing games to pay off gambling debts. But now he's speaking out. ABC's Eva Pilgrim has more.
The National Hockey League investigating claims from San Jose Sharks forward Evander Kane's wife that he was betting and throwing his own games to pay off gambling debts. Anna Kane making the allegations on her Instagram stories. How does the NHL let a compulsive gambling addict still play when he's obviously throwing games to win money? Adding, can someone ask Commissioner Gary Bettman how they let a player bet and win with bookies on his own games?
These are very serious allegations. The NHL is extremely clear in its collective bargaining agreement. Players are not allowed to make any bets on NHL games. And again, betting and influencing the own game, throwing the own game is something that the NHL absolutely doesn't want.
The hockey star firing back, saying the two are in the midst of getting a divorce. Responding to the allegations, tweeting, I have never gambled bet on hockey, never gambled bet on a Sharks game, never gambled bet on any of my games, and never thrown a hockey game. I look forward to cooperating fully with the league's investigation, having my name cleared, and looking forward to this upcoming season. The NHL saying the integrity of our game is paramount, and the league takes these allegations very seriously. The Sharks releasing a statement supporting a full and transparent investigation.
The punishments are very severe. They can range from the cancellation of a player's contract to indefinite suspension.
One of the league's top scorers, the hockey star, is 3 seasons into a $49 million 7-year contract, but still has a history of money troubles. In January, he filed for bankruptcy, claiming to be $26 million in debt. In 2019, a Las Vegas casino sued Kane, alleging he failed to repay a $500,000 gambling bet. The casino reportedly later dropping the lawsuit.
Imagine spending a vacation in the Italian countryside or at a villa in Provence, France, touring the area with friends and tasting wine at every stop. Now imagine that's your actual job, something that you get paid for. Well, actors Matthew Rhys, Matthew Good, James Purefoy, and Dominic West get to do just that, enjoying wine, food, and each other's company to make the wine show. And this season, they tackle Portugal's Douro Valley. Joining us now is one of the hosts of the wine show, Emmy-winning actor Matthew Rhys. Welcome to the show, Matthew.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. And I would like to qualify, it's an incredibly difficult job drinking wine from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. It's incredibly hard. I tell you what's hard is after about 11:30 a.m., it's hard to find a superlative that's A, original or coherent that you haven't already said. And the producers shout at you things like, stop saying you'd buy this bottle at Christmas.
We feel your pain of drinking wine and getting paid for it. We get it. We get it. So before we talk about season 3, which just premiered, tell me, how did you manage to swing this gig? Is it even a job for you? I mean, you said that it's hard, but does it really feel like work?
Listen, I've lived on the horns of a dilemma about saying this to people, because the people you do say, you go, actually, I found it quite hard having a hangover for a whole month or getting up at 8 a.m. and doing a first tasting. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Yes, I did find it a little bit hard being that drunk all day. I know it sounds terrible. But yes, my appreciation for people like Joe Fattorini, who was our OB, Wine Kenobis, we called him, who could actually do proper tastings throughout the whole day and still find the tasting notes and guide us through the wine. My hat came off to, because I couldn't quite believe people can actually do that on a marathon level. But yes, on the flip side is it's the dream job. And Matthew Good's brother-in-law is a very successful television producer, always wanted to do a show about wine, and one day said to Matthew Good, he says, I've got the wine master. I just need 2 idiots who like wine but know nothing about it. And Matthew Good went, what about me and Matthew Rhys? And that was basically it.
Yeah, I can imagine after that second glass, it's kind of hard to stick your nose in and say, oh, I think right now I'm deciphering the lavender and the cherry and the leather, right? But this season you added a new co-host, actor Dominic West, who said that on his first day of shooting, he was confused about exactly what to do because he wasn't even acting a role. He even asked the producers, who am I? Is that hard for you, being yourself and talking among your friends rather than acting, or does the wine help with all of that?
Well, yes, you've hit the nail on the head. The wine certainly helps with all of that, and I agree with Dominic. We'd done it for a couple of seasons prior, but I'd never really presented where you're looking down the camera, which felt so alien to us. Where you're not given a script, you have to come up with your own words. Hard as that may seem, you're not given a costume. You realize how much you can hide, or how much structure is given for you, to camouflage or to hide within scripted drama, which is usually what we do. But as you very, very astutely pointed out, the wine certainly helps with getting over those hurdles.
And let's talk about season 3, which was focused entirely on Portugal. However, your adventure was a bit closer to home, New York City, where you toured with co-host Joe Fratiani. Here's a highlight.
Right, now then, where would you like to begin? My personal favourite usually is a bagel and lox. Okay. A huge fan of the white fish. The bialys I love also. Hallow.
What? Bialis?
Bialy.
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 A bialy?
A bialy.
A bialy.
Yes. Right. Try one with some lox.
You were at the iconic Russ and Daughters in the Lower East Side. How did a Welshman become an expert in Jewish deli?
Russ and Daughters has a very warm place in our hearts. It certainly, I remember when just after Kerry had our child, it was Russ and Daughters that certainly helped with the breastfeeding for her, the refueling. And with our family, you know, we always are grabbing bagels for the kids. But this was such an incredible treat that I wasn't running in just getting toasted plain bagels with cream cheese and butter. I was allowed to sit down at Russ and Daughters with some incredible wine and actually take my time over this incredible breakfast. So that was a real treat. That was one of those moments when the show affords a luxury that I certainly have never experienced. I'm sure we'll never experience again. But yes, I was filming something else when all the boys went to Portugal. So my segments were pairing wine, or Joe was pairing wines with the incredible variety of cuisine that New York has to offer.
And you took Joe to some of your favorite restaurants to talk about pairing wine with the varied international cuisine that New York City is known for, even some ethnic restaurants that don't really have the tradition of serving wine. What did you learn?
You know, it's hard to begin to answer that question, because what it certainly did was it reminded me and made me appreciate even more the wealth of diversity that there is in New York. I appreciated the city for what it is, which is made up of this multicultural, you know, multi-ethnic, beautiful melting pot that everyone has brought, you know, their traditions and their cuisines from wherever. And I was so overjoyed to be a part of a lot of those stories, because inevitably you go to a restaurant in New York, you don't know the story behind the person who opened that restaurant, where they came from. So that was another element that the show afforded, was to get to know all these incredible stories. And, you know, I'd never been to a Portuguese restaurant in New York, and that opened my eyes to that. And just being allowed into these kitchens was just such an incredible treat.
After 3 seasons of doing this deep dive into the world of wine, is there something that you've discovered, region or a type of wine, that has become your absolute favorite, something that you feel like might often be overlooked?
I think our very first few days, or the first week, or the first anything of the wine show was where we were in Italy, in Chianti, where they make Chianti Classico, which has become the firm favorite in my heart, simply because Joe, I remember saying, he said, it's ironic we're starting here, because he said, everyone always asks me, what should I bring? We know, give me the standard bearer, the one wine that you can't go wrong with. And he maintains it's Chianti Classico, if it has the black cockerel on the label that proves it was made in the region. So my eyes have been open to Chianti Classico. It's remained with me, and I stand by his words. You can take a bottle to any event, any meal, and it will pair usually very well and stand up to its name.
Well, before I let you go, let me beg and plead that for the next season, I'm available. But more important than that, congratulations on your 5th Emmy nomination, this time for the role of Perry Mason. We wish you the very best of luck. Matthew Rhys, thank you so much for your time. Seasons 1, 2, and 3 of The Wine Show are available on Sundance now. And before we go tonight, our image of the day. Take a look. This is Mr. Lordi, singer of the Finnish heavy metal band called Lordi, and he has just received his 2nd dose. He reportedly told the press on site, quote, "They put a big needle in my arm, and that's exactly why I came here." Officials around the world are urging people, come as you are and just get the shot. Mr. Lordi did just that. That is our show for this hour. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Coming up in the next hour, we're staying on top of several things, including what feels like the recurring nightmare we can't seem to wake up from: long lines of people getting tested for COVID again. Will this impact those of us who have summer travel plans this month? And how is the travel industry adapting? And our conversation with the Cuban ambassador to the UN, why he says what we know about the unprecedented uprising last month on the island is wrong, despite the mounds of evidence that say
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news. Right now, with so much at stake, Sunday mornings, this is the place. Taking on the tough questions with straightforward reporting. Thank you for making ABC's This Week with George the #1 Sunday morning news show versus the competition.
Welcome to This Week.
GMA Friday. Get ready, America, because Nelly's about to ignite your summer weekend. It's Nelly with special guests performing for you. Friday on Good Morning America, sponsored by Caesars Rewards.
He calls himself the BTK Strangler.
BTK was a monster.
My father's a good guy, Boy Scout leader, president of the church, and then there's a knock on my door. He says, your dad has been arrested as BTK. I was like, I think I'm gonna pass out.
Your father is confessing to being a serial killer.
Now, the daughter of a notorious serial killer. Her story. My Father, BTK. The 2020 event special, Friday at 9/8 Central on ABC.
I can tell you that I'm not a person who wants to die. I'm not the strongest every day, but I'm not the weakest either. And I won't break.
Whitney Houston, she had the ingredients.
Just pow. She was the queen. A crown was given to her, and crowns are heavy.
You think it's easy being a superstar? You have no idea.
Superstar Whitney Houston. Wednesday night, August 11th on ABC and streaming on Hulu.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back. We're surrounded by people squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us. Hey everyone, I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We are monitoring several developments here at ABC News at this hour. The eviction moratorium expired on Saturday after Congress was unable to extend the pandemic measure, potentially leading to mass evictions across the country. Democrats in Congress had pushed for an extension but failed to pass it. The Biden administration announced some new measures to prevent evictions, but Dems don't believe the measures are going far enough. White House officials say a Supreme Court ruling prevents the CDC from extending the moratorium. They say states need to do more to encourage people to apply for help through the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. The Taliban is gaining large amounts of ground in rural parts of Afghanistan, and today they are fighting to control 3 major cities there. U.S. officials say they have been conducting airstrikes in the region against the Taliban for the past 2 weeks. The country's president blames the situation on the U.S.'s sudden pullout, but says his government has a plan to get things under control within 6 months. Peace talks started last year. They have not made any substantial progress. Celebrity Kathy Griffin has lung cancer, although she says she has never smoked. She announced the news on her Twitter account and says the doctors are optimistic. She says the cancer is in stage 1 and that they will have to remove half of her left lung. Nightline's Juju Chang sits down with her. Be sure to tune in on ABC. Now to the latest on the coronavirus pandemic. The U.S. daily COVID-19 case average jumping to more than 72,000 cases a day. That's up more than 500% just since mid-June. The calls for more growing louder as cities and states bring back some COVID-19 rules once again to help stop the spread. ABC's Janae Norman has more from hard-hit Louisiana.
Tonight, faced with the highest COVID infection rate in the country, hospitals in Louisiana starting to run out of beds. Some reporting seeing a new COVID patient every hour.
There are no more beds left. These are the darkest days of this pandemic. We are no longer giving adequate care to patients.
Federal disaster teams arriving in Baton Rouge to help handle the crush of COVID patients as hospitals face staffing shortages.
We're beyond a tipping point. If adults and children 12 years of age and older would simply get what we know to be a safe and effective vaccine, we could avoid all of this.
Across the country, health officials say it's the unvaccinated being overwhelmed by the Delta variant. In Missouri, 31-year-old Daryl Barker regrets not getting the vaccine as he's fighting for his life in the ICU. His wife and 6-year-old son only able to watch through this window.
I was strongly against getting the vaccine just because we're a strong conservative family. But that little boy out there is a reason to have a vaccine.
Nearly 80% of U.S. counties are now either reporting high or substantial community transmission. Hospitals in those hot zones now push to the limit. Austin, Texas, with just 10 ICU beds for a metro area of 2.3 million people. Officials there sounding the alarm about the threat to pregnant women.
Now we ask, Lord, your special blessing upon this unit.
Teams on the front lines praying to get through this latest surge.
Our nurses who are dedicated to their community, their home, are heartbroken watching their friends, family, and neighbors die. Literally die.
Over the weekend, more than 100,000 COVID cases reported in just 24 hours, the highest daily number since February.
This remains a pandemic of the unvaccinated, where the vast majority of spread is in this country is among those who are unvaccinated.
Dr. Anthony Fauci saying CDC data shows just 0.01% of breakthrough infections after full vaccination led to hospitalization or death. Today, the U.S. hitting the president's July 4th goal of getting 70% of adults partially vaccinated nearly a month late. But 90 million Americans eligible for the vaccine have yet to get a single shot. And across the country, a maze of shifting mask rules. Louisiana today announcing a new statewide mask mandate.
Simply put, there's a dangerous amount of COVID spreading in Louisiana right now.
Our thanks to Janae for that. And the pandemic is causing so much uncertainty with so many excited to get back out there and travel. So what do you do about upcoming trips? And is the travel industry shifting its plans due to the Delta variant? Will Reeve has more.
With the UK reopening to vaccinated Americans, United Airlines telling ABC News it's adding a slew of flights between America and the UK, 40 per week. This as the more contagious Delta variant spreads across the country, some concerned about their summer travel plans. On average, more than 2 million travelers are flying every day. So we asked the experts, is it safe to travel? Dr. Anne Remoyne, epidemiologist at UCLA, says the unvaccinated are the ones who really need to rethink travel.
If you are vaccinated, you yourself do not have to be worried about, am I going to get really sick, be hospitalized and die? That is a very unlikely scenario. If you are unvaccinated, you do have to really consider this.
Other experts like Dr. Colleen Kraft, an infectious disease expert at Emory Healthcare in Atlanta, say traveling regardless of vaccination status should be done with caution.
If you have a choice in the matter, choosing something that's less risky for you and your family is something you can do.
As the variant continues to spread, airlines so far not making changes to existing protocol, including full capacity flights. Masks, which are currently required by the CDC for all U.S. flights, working alongside cabin air filters, which airlines say hold up even against the very contagious Delta variant. Trade association Airlines for America saying in part, the ventilation on board aircraft provides substantial protection. Delta Airlines saying filters capture the coronavirus family and other viruses and particulates with upwards of 99.9% efficacy. There is no greater risk of this new variant being transmitted on board.
Our thanks to Will Reeve for that. New today, a group of bipartisan senators on the Hill have unveiled the legislative text for an infrastructure package that looks to rebuild America's roads, mass transit systems, and expand broadband internet. The new piece of legislation could be voted on as early as the end of the week. ABC's Ike Ajachi is in Washington with more.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says congratulations are in order.
We haven't done a large bipartisan bill of this nature in a long time.
After 2 long days of weekend sessions, a bipartisan group of Senate negotiators finalized an agreement for an infrastructure bill. The new price tag, $1.1 trillion with $550 billion in new spending, $110 billion earmarked for roads and bridges, $39 billion for public transit, and $65 billion to expand span broadband internet. Senators introduced the bill late Sunday with what appears to be a newfound appreciation for bipartisanship.
We will continue to once again demonstrate to our country and to the world that we can indeed do our jobs, that we can legislate, that we can work together.
No new taxes, core infrastructure only, and it's great for the American people.
The full Senate will now begin working through amendments to the bill. The original group of Senate negotiators will be tasked with making sure 10 Republicans stay on board, a task West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin believes will be completed.
And you think it will pass?
I do. Oh, absolutely. I do. And you see Chuck Schumer and you see Mitch McConnell both voting for the same thing. It's unbelievable.
The bill, however, will face more scrutiny once it gets to the House. Speaker Nancy Pelosi has already said she won't take up the infrastructure bill unless the Senate passes a budget reconciliation bill that includes President Biden's human infrastructure proposal that will likely cost around $3.5 trillion. Nancy Pelosi says Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen will have a presentation tomorrow regarding eviction moratoriums, all while President Biden is urging state and local governments to extend the moratorium by 2 months. Lindsay?
Ike, thank you. Last month, Cuba was rocked by the largest protests to occur on that communist island nation in a generation. Thousands took to the streets, frustrated by a battered economy with limited opportunities for upward mobility and food and power shortages. All this as that government, like every other nation, has struggled to contain COVID. In the weeks since, Cuba's president has blamed U.S. sanctions for the weak economic growth on the island. The Biden administration has imposed more sanctions targeting Cuba's police force and its leaders over what some call a brutal crackdown on protests. And the people of Cuba continue to struggle. Joining us now is Cuba's ambassador to the United Nations, Yuri Gala-Lopez. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on your program.
On the day after those mass July 11th protests, your president, who initially issued a call to combat, did acknowledge that Cuban families have been hard hit by the current economic crisis that the pandemic has only made worse. What's the government doing to address the concerns of the many who took to the streets?
Well, let me start by saying that on Sunday, July 11th, there were some demonstrations of a limited scale that took place that day. But it should be noted that there wasn't any social uprising or a general uprising, but demonstrations of a limited scale that did not gain the support of the whole majority of the population. As a matter of fact, most of the people who took to the streets on Sunday the 11th were actually in favor of the government. These events, it should be noted, were the result of an intense political and communications operation orchestrated and actually carried out and financed with U.S. federal governments and some funds from the political machinery in Florida. I think that's important to be taken into account. In regards to your specific query, I should say that the Cuban government has actually said with transparency that there are a number of issues that could be improved, and we are in the way of addressing those legitimate concerns. But on July 11th, in spite of that some people that went to the streets might have had some legitimate concerns, the reality is that there were some elements that carry out violent attacks against public institutions, against government facilities, stores, even private property as well.
So I'm just trying to get this straight, because our perception here in the United States was that many of the people who were protesting were against what was happening there within the Cuban government. You're suggesting that they were showing up to protest to show their support for the Cuban government?
I think this is what you're saying, to me, reflects the effectiveness at some point of the manipulation of the information. There is an ongoing campaign of misinformation about what has happened in Cuba that day and the days after. I think that the reality is that the people some people indeed took to the streets on Sunday the 11th, July the 11th, but the majority of the persons who actually went to the streets were trying to showcase the support of the Cuban Revolution.
And Ambassador, we just saw some activists on the island who were detained. There's some footage there after the protests last month. We're told that some are still being detained. We're hearing that police in some instances are watching anti-government activists, and the crackdown has not ended. Can you please give us just the latest as far as what the situation is like now?
Well, as in any other country, when there are violent protests or violent manifestations or incidents such as the one that we have seen on July 11th. And I'm not saying that all of the people who actually were demonstrated were violent, but there were some criminal elements, persons who actually take advantage of that situation and try to create madness in our streets. And obviously, those who have violated Cuban laws, they were detained and they were subject to prosecutions. But by following due process, I mean, those who have been detained are to be prosecuted, they have the right to actually have a lawyer and to continue the process as it is established in our laws.
You know, in many scenarios, the Cuban government has blamed the U.S. trade embargo for the economic conditions on the island, but we saw protesters chanting homeland and life. They weren't saying anything at all about the embargo. The Cuban Communist Party has been in charge for more than 6 decades. Would you agree that they have a role to play here?
Well, I think this is the issue here. And this is not a new strategy. Back in 1960, then Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, Lester Mallory, when he was doing an analysis of the Cuban Revolution back in 1960, he actually said, and it is a public document now, that the Cuban Revolution has a great support, and that the only manner in which that support could be eroded was to try to, create problems in the economy so that the people, because of the scarcities, the shortcomings, would eventually go to the streets. So that's an old philosophy, and the whole blockade is based on a similar philosophy to try to create a very difficult situation in Cuba so that the people would eventually to take to the streets to actually try to destroy the project that we have supported for so many years. That's a reality. And the COVID pandemic, as I said before, is creating many problems, not only to Cuba, but to many countries in the world. So the whole cruelty of the policy of blockade is showcased when it comes to the fact that the previous government took advantage of that global situation, very difficult situation, to strengthen the economic sanctions on Cuba.
And subsequent to July 11th, there were occasions when the government cut off the internet for the people there. I'm just trying to understand why the government would do something like that.
Well, on that, I should say that there wasn't any shutdown of internet services as a whole. There was indeed some, from time to time problems with certain services of internet in Cuba, but there hasn't been any shutdown of internet. But the real story here is the use of internet as a weapon against Cuba.
Okay, Ambassador, so I actually had some other questions. I'm going to get rid of that because I just want to come back to you and say yes or no. So you at no point are aware that Cuba at any time intentionally cut off internet service to the residents of Cuba. That never happened intentionally.
There weren't any shutdown of internet, but there were some issues sporadically with certain services of internet. It has to be reminded that internet in Cuba has been implemented as a result of a policy of the government, in spite of the U.S. embargo, in spite of the U.S. blockade.
Ambassador Yuri Gala-Lopez, we thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you.
Still ahead, the wildfires threatening some of the most popular vacation spots for Europeans. And is all healthy food really healthy? How do you know just what to really put into your body? Stay with us.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
This week, it's time to wake up with
Good Morning America,
Ryan Reynolds and John Cena. Plus, GMA's great Summer Rise and Shine tour rolls on. So, where will we be next? Just wait until you see. Good Morning America, all this week.
People love a good scandal.
Erica Jane.
The Real Housewives star accused with her husband of staging a fake divorce.
Thomas Girardi accused of embezzlement.
The biggest question is, did she know?
The Housewife and the Hustler, only on Hulu.
Right now, with so much at stake, Sunday mornings, this is the place. Taking on all the tough questions. Straightforward reporting. No spin, no hype, no bull. Thank you for making ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos the #1 Sunday morning news show versus the competition.
Welcome to This Week.
Now, with so much on the line, more Americans are turning to David Muir and ABC's World News Tonight than any other newscast across all of television.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you? Yeah.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're going to move back. Let's move back. We're surrounded by people
Squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us. Welcome back, everyone. We are tracking several international headlines at this hour. Wildfires in Turkey are continuing now for a 6th day. Officials there say they are currently 9 active wildfires and 8 people have died to date. 138 wildfires have broken out in Turkey since July 28th. Areas affected include popular resort areas. Parts of Italy and Greece have also been hit by wildfires as extreme heat continues to affect the region. Israel is now the first country in the world to offer a third COVID-19 vaccine shot. The booster shot is being offered to people over the age of 60 and other vulnerable populations. In the UK and Germany, a booster shot is also expected to be released next month. Here in the U.S., the FDA is currently reviewing data about whether or not we will need them here as well. A Belarusian track and field athlete has been granted a Polish humanitarian visa after she claims there was an attempt to forcibly return her to her home country of Belarus by its government. Kristina Simonouskaya had been critical of the Belarus coaching staff. The International Olympic Committee said they are currently investigating. Our next guest is a pediatric neuroendocrinologist who specializes in childhood obesity and diabetes and a New York Times bestselling author. Dr. Robert Lustig looks to dispel many of the myths surrounding our health in his new book, Metabolic, the Lure and Lies of Processed Food, Nutrition, and Modern Medicine. Dr. Lustig, we thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate being here.
So you dedicate much of your book to defining what healthy really means. Break that down for us. What does it mean for a food to be truly healthy?
Well, the question is, what does healthy mean? You know, the FDA has a definition that has something to do with number of calories, amount of vitamin D, amount of potassium and magnesium. The USDA doesn't even offer a definition, because if it did, then all of the foods would not be able to advertise that they were healthy. So the question is, what does healthy really mean? After digesting all of the data and looking at all of the studies, I'm proffering two precepts to determine whether any given food is healthy. Number one, protect the liver. Number two, feed the gut. 6 words, 2 clauses, and it works. Now, what do I mean by protect the liver? Protect the liver from what? Well, protect the liver from the onslaught of simple sugars and carbohydrates, which drive insulin resistance and drive chronic metabolic disease, the most notorious of which is sugar. Trans fats used to be, but now sugar is probably the number one overwhelmer of liver function. Now, feed the gut. Well, feed the gut what? Turns out we have 10 trillion cells in our body, but we have 100 trillion bacteria in our intestine. They outnumber us 10 to 1. Each of us is really a big bag of bacteria with legs. So anything that increases the amount of nutrition going down further into the intestine will feed the gut. And I can sum that up in one word: fiber. Fiber feeds the gut. And when you don't give the gut the fiber it needs, the gut actually strips the mucin layer off your intestinal epithelial cells, denuding your intestine and rendering you much more susceptible to chronic inflammation, insulin resistance, and again, chronic disease. So protect the liver, feed the gut. Real food is low sugar, high fiber. Processed food is high sugar, low fiber. Real food is healthy, and processed food, for lack of a better word, is poison.
So we just saw an image of a mother and child in a grocery store. What are the first things that you're filling up in your grocery cart when you go in? What kinds of foods and meals are you eating every day?
Right. Everyone wants to know what I eat, and I will tell you right now, that's off limits. But having said that, what should be in people's grocery cart are the foods that don't have a label. And the reason is because real food doesn't need a label. Real food doesn't have a label. In fact, real food is made by companies whose logos you've never seen, so you wouldn't even know the label if you saw it. If you see a label on a package of food, you must consider that a warning label, because that means something's been done to the food. Real food doesn't have a label because it doesn't need one. If you've processed it in any way, shape, or form, then a label is required. So that tells you that something's been done to the food. So you can actually learn from the label how processed it is if you take the time to look at the ingredients.
So you're suggesting the more ingredients it has, potentially the more dangerous it is for your body?
Without question. The foods that are best for you are the ones that come as single foods around the edges of the grocery store. Ultimately, processed food is, because it floods the liver and starves the gut. Ultimately, processed food is the single worst thing we can do for ourselves. Processed food is a poison.
And you're right that not only is eliminating processed food good for your health, but that it can fix many of the environmental challenges that we face. What does that look like?
Absolutely. So everybody's worried about the cows because the cows make methane. And it's true, the cows do make methane, but you know what? They make 5 times the amount of methane today than they did 50 years ago. And the reason is because of the antibiotics that we've been giving the cows, because they have to live on the CAFO, the concentrated animal feeding operations in Kansas, because they're not living on the farm anymore. So because they're living in close quarters and because they're living with their manure all over the place, the breeders have to pump them full of antibiotics, and those antibiotics kill off their good bacteria, allowing the methane-producing bacteria to increase. In addition, if you eat processed vegan food, that is Coke, Doritos, Pepsi, Oreos, what you're doing is you're spraying nitrogen onto those fields because the animals are not there. The animals used to be the fertilizer, but now you have to spray nitrogen fertilizer in order for those crops to grow. That increases the amount of nitrous oxide, the nitrogen runoff, which is killing the Gulf of Mexico Mexico and all of our rivers, and also contributes to climate change because nitrous oxide has 33 times the heat trapping capacity of methane and lasts 9 times longer. It lasts 114 years in the atmosphere. So just because you're eating plant-based food doesn't mean you're helping the planet.
We have 30 seconds left with you, but what would your advice be for someone who is looking to take those first steps toward a healthier lifestyle?
Eat real food. Now, the problem is that real food right now costs more. And the reason is because we subsidize all the components of processed food, corn, wheat, soy, sugar. Those subsidies make processed food cheaper. The problem is you may save money at the grocery store, and even that's a question mark, but you will ultimately pay for it in terms of healthcare costs 100 times over. It is not a good deal.
Pay now or pay later. That's what my grandmother used to say. Dr. Robert Lustig.
You can pay the farmer or you can pay the doctor.
I love it. That's a good way to put it. Dr. Robert Lustig, we thank you so much for your time and your insight.
Thanks for having me.
And that'll do it for us. That's our show for tonight. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. Have a great night.